Daniel had always preferred quiet mornings. As a single father, his days were usually full of work, cooking, cleaning, and taking care of his 8-year-old son. Evan, morning was the only time he could breathe for a moment and feel the world settle. On weekends, he made it a habit to take Evan to the Interspecies Park, a large open area. It's created after humans and friendly alien visitors started living together on Earth. The park had green grass, tall silver trees brought from different planets, and benches carved from smooth stone that stayed cool even in warm weather. Daniel liked the park because it made Evan happy. The boy loved running around, meeting people, asking questions about every strange plant or glowing insect from another world. For Daniel, these visits were simple but precious moments of peace. On this particular day, the air felt calm. The sun had not yet reached its brightest point, and the breeze moved gently through the silver leaves. Daniel sat on a bench while Evan played near the small fountain, shaped like a spiral. Daniel watched him with a small smile. His life had changed so much after his wife passed away 3 years earlier. Since then, he had raised Evan alone. Some days were difficult, but he never complained. He wanted Evan to feel safe, to grow in a world that was changing fast, with new species, new cultures, new everything. Daniel wanted to keep up for his son's sake. While he was lost in thought, he noticed movement from the corner of his eye. Someone was slowly approaching the bench. At first, Daniel thought it was a child coming to ask him something. But as the figure came closer, he realized it wasn't a human child. It was an alien girl, small, delicate-looking, with soft lavender skin and big round eyes that reflected light like glass. She wore a simple blue outfit that looked like a student uniform. Her hair, if it could be called hair, looked like fine strands of silver thread that reached. Just below her shoulders, what stood out most was that she had only one leg. But Daniel already knew that some species naturally had one strong limb designed like a spring, allowing them to move quickly when they wanted. This girl, however, wasn't bouncing or moving fast. She was stepping slowly, carefully, almost nervously. Her single leg looked strong, but she shifted her weight as though she was not used to walking in public spaces. Daniel glanced around, expecting to see her parents. But she was alone. The girl hesitated a few steps away from him. She looked at the bench, then at Daniel, then at the ground. She seemed unsure whether she should come closer or turn back. Daniel noticed her small hands trembling slightly as she brushed her silver hair behind her ear. He gave her a gentle, polite smile. It was the same smile he always used with children who seemed nervous around strangers. The girl opened her mouth as if to speak, but no sound came out. She looked down again, gathered her courage, and finally whispered, "Excuse me." Her voice was soft, like she was afraid to be heard too clearly. Daniel leaned forward a little so she wouldn't have to raise her voice. "Yes." The girl swallowed hard. Her throat moved visibly. Then she asked the question that had clearly taken all her courage to say, "Can I sit here?" For a moment, Daniel was surprised not because of the question itself, but because of how afraid she looked while asking. Children usually had no hesitation when they wanted to sit on a bench. They didn't ask permission this quietly. They didn't look like they expected to be turned away. Daniel looked at the empty space beside him. There was plenty of room. The bench was long enough for 5 people. He wondered why she thought she might not be allowed. He gave the warmest answer he could manage. "Of course you can," he said gently. "Come sit. There's lots of space." The girl blinked. Her large eyes widened slightly, as if she doubted she heard him right. You don't mind?" she asked in a shaky voice. "Not at all," Daniel replied with a small smile. "You're welcome to sit." The girl looked truly shocked, not just surprised, but almost moved. Slowly, she hopped closer, using small, controlled motions. She lifted herself onto the bench with careful effort, her single leg giving a soft bounce as she settled down. She sat far at the edge at first, leaving a large distance between them, but Daniel didn't say anything. He didn't want her to feel pressured. Evan noticed the new visitor and rushed over with his usual excitement. "Dad! Dad! Did you see the butterfly thing? I... He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the girl. Oh, hello. The girl stiffened, looking unsure how to respond. Evan waved happily. I'm Evan. What's your name? She looked at the ground again. Alira. That's a nice name, Evan said with no hesitation. Are you new here? I haven't seen you before. Lyra nodded softly. Yes. I just moved. A few weeks ago. Cool. Do you want to see the fountain with me? It sprays water in spiral shapes like your hair, Evan said excitedly, completely unaware that he sounded like he was complimenting her appearance. Lyra's eyes widened again this time in surprise, not fear. She opened her mouth, but no words came. It was clear she didn't know how to respond to friendliness from a stranger. Daniel watched her carefully. She was small, quiet, nervous-and, clearly not used to warm interactions. You can go with him if you like, Daniel said gently. He loves showing people the fountain. Lyra looked at him in disbelief. Then she looked at Evan, who was already bouncing in place, waiting for her answer. Finally, she nodded. Oh, okay. Evan grabbed her hand impulsively. Daniel quickly watched to make sure Lyra wasn't uncomfortable, but her expression was more surprised than scared. Slowly, she allowed Evan to lead her toward the fountain. Daniel leaned back on the bench, but he kept his eyes on them from a respectful distance. He watched Evan excitedly explain things while Lyra listened carefully. She didn't talk much, but her tension seemed to fade little by little. Daniel wondered how many times she had been ignored or stared at before. She acted like someone who expected rejection. Someone who didn't believe she deserved a place beside others, maybe. She had approached the bench expecting him to say no. The idea made Daniel's heart soften a little, after a few minutes. The two children returned. Lyra sat down again, less tense now, though she still kept her hands folded neatly in her lap. Is this your father? She asked Evan quietly. Yes, Evan said proudly. This is my dad. He's nice. Lyra looked at Daniel again with a strangely emotional expression. Thank you for letting me sit here, she said softly. You don't have to thank me, Daniel replied. Anyone deserves a place to sit. Lyra's lips pressed together, as if she didn't know how to accept that kindness. Daniel had no idea yet. But this simple moment, this small permission, would become the start of a connection he never expected. A connection that would change Lyra's life, and maybe his own. After that first encounter on the bench, Lyra began returning to the park almost every day. At first, she stayed quiet and cautious, sitting a little distance away from Daniel and Evan. But as days passed, she began to feel safer. There was something different about Daniel. Unlike some adults who stared, whispered, or avoided her because of her alien appearance, Daniel treated her as if she were just another child, someone who deserved respect and kindness. That alone made her heart feel lighter. Evan was the first to break the invisible wall that Lyra carried around her. He didn't care about differences about her one leg or her lavender skin. He saw her as a friend, and he treated her like one. Do you want to play tag? He asked one day, bouncing toward her with his arms open. Lyra hesitated, her one leg tense as she balanced herself carefully, but she smiled faintly. I don't run very fast, she said quietly. That's okay. I'll go slow, Evan replied, and he started running in place, encouraging her. Slowly, Lyra tried moving along with him. At first, it was awkward. Her spring-like leg moved in a different rhythm than human legs, and she stumbled once or twice. Evan laughed not mockingly, but in a way that made her feel like mistakes were part of fun. It's not shame. Daniel watched them, smiling softly. It warmed his heart to see Evan so happy with someone new. He also noticed that Lyra's nervous glances at him grew less frequent. She didn't have to worry about rejection here, and that gave her courage. After a while, the children sat by the fountain, their legs dangling over the edge. Water sprayed in spirals, catching sunlight and creating tiny rainbows. Lyra looked at it with wide eyes, and for the first time, she laughed a soft, musical sound that made Evan grin. See? Isn't it amazing? Evan said. It looks like magic. It is beautiful, Lyra whispered, her voice trembling slightly with emotion. She looked at him again, and for the first time, Her eyes held trust rather than caution. Daniel noticed the change. He realized that small gestures like letting her sit, letting her play, and treating her normally had already begun to heal some of her fear and loneliness. But he also knew that she must have a story, one that explained why a young alien girl would appear so cautious in a world full of kindness. Later that afternoon, when Evan ran off to chase a floating orb released by the park's entertainment center, Daniel asked gently, "Lyra, would you like to tell me about yourself?" "Only if you want to, of course." Lyra hesitated, her large eyes flicking toward the trees as if searching for someone who might be missing. Then she took a slow breath. I just moved here." "My father, he is not here anymore. And my mother. She works long hours. I am usually alone." Daniel nodded slowly, listening carefully. He didn't interrupt, but he didn't rush her either. The way he sat, relaxed and attentive, made her feel like her words were safe, like they wouldn't be judged or ignored. "I try to stay out of trouble," she continued. "I try to go unnoticed. But it's hard. People stare. They whisper. They laugh." Her voice broke slightly, and she pressed her hands together tightly in her lap. Daniel's heart ached at her words. He remembered the days after his wife passed when Evan and he had felt lonely, though never as much as Lyra must have. He leaned forward slightly, keeping his tone soft and calm. "You know, it's normal to feel afraid when people stare or laugh, but not everyone is like that. There are kind people, and some of them, like your friend Evan, see the real you." Lyra's lips curved into the faintest smile. "He is kind. He makes me happy," she said quietly. Daniel nodded. "That's good. Happiness is important, especially when you feel alone. And remember, you're allowed to take up space, to be seen, to belong. You don't have to hide just to make others comfortable." Her large eyes widened slightly. That simple statement felt new to her. She had spent so long avoiding attention, trying to shrink herself so others wouldn't notice her differences. Hearing a human say that she could belong, it felt like sunlight after a long winter. Over the next few weeks, Daniel gently became part of her life. Not in a way that forced friendship, but quietly, through simple gestures. He shared snacks from his lunch when she didn't have time to eat, reminded her of park rules so she wouldn't feel lost, and sometimes simply sat beside her in silence, offering a presence she could rely on. One day, Evan ran ahead to the playground, and Lyra remained seated, looking tired. Daniel sat beside her and offered her a small bottle of water. "It's okay to rest," he said. "No need to rush or do everything at once." Lyra took the water carefully, nodding. "Thank you for being kind," she said softly. "You're welcome," Daniel replied, smiling. "Everyone deserves kindness. And sometimes, kindness can change someone's whole day or even their life." The girl's eyes glistened, as if she understood the weight of that sentence. Daniel didn't push her to speak more. He understood that she needed time to trust, to feel safe, to open her heart. As days turned into weeks, a quiet routine developed. Lyra would appear in the mornings, Daniel and Evan would meet her at the bench, and the children would play or explore together. Slowly, Lyra began talking, more sharing little stories about her home planet, about the strange foods she liked, about the games she used to play with friends, who were now far away. Daniel learned that Lyra had a clever mind and a gentle spirit. She was observant, noticing small things that most children might overlook, like the way sunlight reflected off the water, or how birds from different planets moved in the trees. Her curiosity reminded Daniel of Evan when he was younger. He found himself smiling more, feeling lighter, as if her presence brought something unexpected but welcome into his own life. One afternoon, Lyra confided something that made Daniel's heart tighten. "Sometimes, I feel like I don't belong anywhere," she said quietly, looking at the ground. "Not on my planet. Not here, nowhere. I try to blend in, but I can't." Daniel leaned closer, careful not to crowd her. "You do belong," he said, voice calm but firm. "Maybe not everyone will understand, but that doesn't mean you don't have a place. You have Evan and you have me. And there are others who will learn to see the real you. Belonging doesn't always happen instantly. Sometimes it takes patience, but it will come. Lyra looked up at him, eyes wide and shining. For the first time, she seemed to believe him. A small smile formed on her lips, delicate but real. She shifted slightly, sitting more comfortably, letting herself relax in a way she hadn't before. Daniel didn't realize it yet. But this was the beginning of a bond that would grow strong. Not just between him and Lyra, but also between her and Evan, and eventually between Lyra and the world around her. It all started with small acts, allowing her to sit, listening when she spoke, and offering kindness without conditions. By the end of that afternoon, the three of them walked together slowly toward the park exit. Evan skipped ahead, laughing at something invisible in the air. Lyra walked carefully, her single leg adjusting naturally, and Daniel kept a protective yet respectful distance behind her. She looked up at him once, giving him a tiny, grateful smile that spoke volumes. Daniel knew that tomorrow she would return. And he knew that each day he could help her feel a little more at home in a world that had once felt too big, too strange, and too lonely. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting long golden rays across the park, Daniel felt a quiet sense of hope. Life could be difficult, unpredictable, and often painful. But kindness, he realized, had the power to change lives even for a small alien girl who had only asked a simple question, "Can I sit here?" And for Lyra, that small act of generosity, the simple answer of a human single father, was already changing her world. Days turned into weeks, and Lyra's visits to the park became a steady part of her life. At first she was shy, careful not to draw attention to herself. But with Daniel and Evan, she slowly started to feel safe. She began arriving a little earlier, staying a little longer, and even venturing further into the park than she had at first. The fear that had shadowed her for so long was gradually giving way to a sense of curiosity and hope. Evan loved showing her new parts of the park. There was a small hill that rolled gently down to a pond, where alien water lilies floated, glowing faintly under the sunlight. There was a playground with swings and slides, where children from different species laughed together. There were even fruit trees that grew strange, sweet-tasting fruits from planets Daniel had never visited. Evan wanted Lyra to see it all. He wanted her to feel included, not like a visitor, but like she belonged. One sunny morning, Lyra arrived earlier than usual. She perched on the edge of the bench, balancing carefully on her single leg, and waited for Daniel and Evan to arrive. Daniel had noticed her habit of coming early, but hadn't commented it wasn't his way to make her feel rushed or pressured. Instead, he preferred letting her set the pace. When Evan ran toward her, out of breath but smiling, she felt a warmth that she hadn't felt in a long time. She waved shyly, and Evan grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the hill. Daniel followed slowly, keeping a watchful eye on both of them. "Race you to the top," Evan shouted, his little legs pumping fast. Lyra laughed, a soft musical sound that made Daniel smile. She tried to match him, hopping and balancing on her spring-like leg. At first she fell behind, but she didn't stop. Instead, she found her rhythm and slowly gained ground. Evan slowed to wait for her, his bright grin never fading at the top of the hill. They both collapsed in the grass, laughing and panting. Lyra looked out over the park. Children from various species played together, their laughter floating on the gentle breeze. For a brief moment, Lyra felt like she was part of something bigger, a world that wasn't as lonely as she had feared. Daniel sat down beside her. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" he asked, nodding toward the park. "Yes," Lyra said softly. "It is. Peaceful." She hesitated before speaking again. "I wish I could stay here always." Daniel smiled gently. "You can come as often as you like," he said. "This park, it's for everyone. And you're welcome here any time." Those words, simple as they were, touched Lyra more than she expected. No one had ever said that to her before. On her home planet, people had expectations and rules that left little room for difference. Here, in this strange world, she could breathe. She could be herself without fear. As the weeks went by, Lyra began to open up about her life. She told Daniel and Evan small details at first about the foods she liked, the games she played on her home planet, and the small pets she had loved. She laughed when Evan tried to imitate the way her alien pet moved, hopping and rolling like it had springs instead of legs. But over time, she revealed more serious things. She told Daniel about her father, who had gone missing on a space route trip. She didn't know if he was alive or dead, and the uncertainty weighed heavily on her young mind. Her mother, she explained, worked long hours at the interspecies embassy and rarely had time to be with her. Lyra spent most of her days alone, hiding in quiet corners or wandering streets where she could blend into shadows. Daniel listened carefully, never interrupting, never judging. He realized the depth of her loneliness and the strength it took for her to survive on her own. Even though she was small, even though she was just a child in appearance, Lyra carried burdens that many adults would struggle to bear. "You've been very brave," Daniel said one afternoon, as they rested under the shade of a silver tree. "I know it hasn't been easy. But even though you feel alone sometimes, you're not truly alone anymore. Not while Evan and I are here." Lyra's eyes shimmered as she looked at him. I didn't think anyone would understand," she admitted softly. I thought everyone would look at me and push me away." Daniel shook his head gently. "Not everyone is like that. Some people, they can surprise you. They can be kind when you least expect it. And kindness, it matters more than you know." Her face brightened slightly at that. It was as if a heavy weight had been lifted, even just a little. Lyra began to trust that Daniel and Evan would accept her for who she was, not who she feared she was supposed to be. One day she shared something that made Daniel's heart tighten. "Sometimes, I feel like I don't belong anywhere," she whispered. "Not on my planet. Not here, nowhere. I try to fit in, but I can't. I always feel different." Daniel reached out gently and rested a hand on her shoulder. "Different isn't bad," he said. "It means you're unique. It means you have things that others don't. And uniqueness. It's something to be proud of, not ashamed of." Lyra looked at him with wide eyes. She had never thought of herself as unique in a positive way before. Her one leg, her strange skin color, her alien habits, they were things she had always tried to hide. But now Daniel was showing her that they could be strengths, not weaknesses. As the weeks went by, the park became a place where Lyra could be herself. She laughed more freely, played more boldly, and even started sharing little jokes with Evan. She was still cautious, still careful in some ways. But the trust she had built with Daniel and Evan allowed her to relax in ways she never thought possible. Daniel noticed that her confidence grew slowly, day by day. She would explore more areas of the park, try new foods at the park's interspecies cafe, and even approach other children for brief conversations. Each step, no matter how small, was a victory. And Daniel quietly celebrated each one, knowing how important these small victories were for her heart and mind. One afternoon, Lyra confided something that made Daniel realize just how much she had been carrying alone. "I worry about my father," she said, voice trembling slightly. "I don't know if he's alive. I can't stop thinking about him." Daniel nodded. "It's normal to worry about someone you love," he said softly. "But worrying doesn't mean you're weak. It means you care. And caring is a good thing. It shows your heart is strong." Lyra looked at him, eyes shining. She had never heard such gentle words before. Usually adults would tell her to stop worrying, to focus on other things, or they would dismiss her feelings entirely. But Daniel was different. He was patient. He was understanding. And for the first time, Lyra felt safe sharing the deepest parts of herself. As the day ended and the sun dipped low, casting golden light across the park, Lyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: hope. She wasn't alone. She had Evan, who accepted her without question, and Daniel, who protected her and understood her. The world, which had seemed so big and frightening, now felt a little smaller, a little safer, and a little brighter. Daniel, walking behind them as they left the park, felt a quiet satisfaction. He had only meant to be kind, to offer a place to sit and a friendly smile. But in doing so, he had helped Lyra start a journey of trust, healing, and belonging. And he realized that kindness, simple, patient, consistent kindness could change lives in ways he never imagined. By the time they reached the edge of the park, Lyra looked up at Daniel and smiled softly. It was a smile filled with gratitude, trust, and a fragile, growing sense of belonging. Daniel returned the smile, knowing that this was just the beginning of a bond that would continue to grow and strengthen in the days ahead. Over the following weeks, Daniel quietly became a part of Lyra's life in ways he didn't fully realize at first. He wasn't trying to take on the role of a guardian or a teacher. He was simply being there, offering the steady presence of someone who cared. Lyra began to trust him more and more. She would speak freely about her days, her fears, and her small joys. It was remarkable to see a child who had spent so much of her young life alone begin to open her heart. Evan, of course, was delighted. He loved having a friend, someone who understood his energy and curiosity, someone who could run and play in ways that were entirely new. Lyra had a cautious energy at first, moving carefully with her single leg, but she soon became more confident. She ran across the soft grass, climbed small hills, and even tried to hop onto the low walls surrounding the park's alien garden. Every time she succeeded, her smile grew brighter, and Daniel's chest warmed with quiet pride. One afternoon, as they walked toward the small pond that was Lyra's favorite spot, she suddenly stopped and sat down on the grass. Her expression was serious. Daniel sat beside her, noticing immediately that she was tense. He waited quietly, giving her the space to speak. "I don't want to go back to my apartment today," she admitted softly. "I feel scared there. Sometimes I hear things. The loneliness. It feels bigger than I can handle." Daniel nodded slowly. "I understand," he said gently. "It's okay to feel that way. Feeling lonely doesn't make you weak. It just means you have a heart that cares, a heart that notices the absence of those you love. And feeling scared is natural when the world seems big and unfamiliar." Lyra looked at him, eyes wide and glistening. She was clearly used to adults dismissing her feelings, telling her to be brave or to stop worrying. Daniel's calm voice, steady and patient, was a new experience. She felt seen and understood, and it gave her courage to continue speaking. "I wish I could stay here with you and Evan forever," she said softly, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Daniel smiled gently. "I can't promise forever, because life has its own rules. But I can promise that I will be here as much as I can. You are not alone, Lyra, not while I can help it." For a moment she simply nodded, absorbing the words. Daniel didn't push her to explain more. Instead, he reached into his bag and pulled out a small notebook and a pencil. "Do you want to draw something?" he asked casually. Sometimes drawing helps when feelings are too big for words. Her eyes brightened slightly and she accepted the notebook. She began sketching quietly, her small hands moving with surprising confidence. Daniel watched without interruption, noticing how concentrated she was, how the pencil strokes seemed to ease the tension from her shoulders. Evan, curious, leaned over to see what she was drawing. "Wow, that's amazing." "What is it?" he asked. Lyra hesitated but then spoke softly. "It's my home planet. The hills, the lakes, the skies. I miss it sometimes." Daniel nodded, understanding immediately. "It's beautiful," he said. "And you're keeping it alive here, with your drawing. That's wonderful." Over the next few days, Daniel continued to guide Lyra in small ways, not pushing but gently helping her navigate life on Earth. He taught her about simple human habits, how to use utensils at the cafe, how to navigate the local streets safely, how to ask for help when she needed it. But more importantly, he taught her patience and kindness, not through lectures, but through example. One day as they walked past the schoolyard where older children were playing, Lyra froze. A group of human children pointed at her and laughed. Daniel noticed immediately. He could see the hesitation and fear creeping into her posture, the way she instinctively tried to shrink away. "Do you want to go somewhere else?" Daniel asked softly. "No. I think I can handle it," she whispered. Daniel nodded. "Okay. Remember, being different isn't bad. It's part of what makes you special. Let's walk past them together." He stayed close, walking beside her in a protective but unobtrusive way. Evan ran ahead, waving to the children and calling out a friendly greeting. The older kids paused, confused by Evan's confidence and friendliness. And then one of them shrugged and went back to their game. Lyra looked up at Daniel, eyes wide. You didn't get angry?" she asked softly. "I didn't need to," he replied gently. "Sometimes kindness is stronger than anger. And protecting you doesn't mean being mean to others. It means standing by you, helping you feel safe." Her lips curved into a small, grateful smile. She felt a surge of courage and confidence she had never experienced before. Over time, Lyra began to open up even more. She spoke about her mother's long work hours, her fears about her father, and the loneliness she had carried for so long. Daniel listened without judgment, offering quiet comfort and steady advice when she asked for it. He never dismissed her worries, never made her feel small. Instead, he helped her see that her feelings were valid, that she had every right to hope and to belong. One afternoon, Lyra broke down completely. She had received a message from her mother saying she would be late again and that her father's whereabouts were still unknown. Lyra sat on the bench, trembling, tears streaming down her lavender cheeks. Daniel knelt beside her, speaking softly. "It's okay to cry, Lyra," he said gently. "You don't have to hide your feelings. It's normal to feel sad when things are hard. I'm here. Evan's here. You're not alone." Lyra leaned against him, trembling, and Daniel wrapped an arm around her in a protective, fatherly way. He didn't speak more. He just stayed there, letting her cry, offering comfort with his presence alone. After a while, she sat up, wiping her tears with the back of her hand. "Thank you," she whispered. "I feel better now." "You're welcome," Daniel said softly. "It's okay to feel. It's okay to be human or alien. Your feelings are yours, and they are important." That day marked a turning point. Lyra began to understand that she could trust Daniel completely. She didn't need to hide her fears, her insecurities, or her pain. He accepted all of her, and for the first time, she felt that someone cared deeply for her well-being. The days continued like this, each one building trust and connection. Lyra's confidence grew. She started exploring more of the park, talking to other children cautiously. And even sharing small jokes with Evan, she began to laugh more freely. And her playful energy brought joy not just to her own heart, but to Daniel's and Evan's as well. Daniel realized that being a single father had taught him patience and understanding. But being with Lyra had also taught him something new, how powerful kindness could be, by simply being there, by listening, by respecting her feelings. He had helped heal a little part of her heart that had been broken by loneliness and fear. One evening, as the sun set and painted the park in warm shades of gold and orange, Lyra turned to Daniel with a quiet question. "Why? Why didn't you push me away that first day?" she asked softly, her voice barely audible. Daniel smiled gently, kneeling to be at her level. "Because no one should face life alone," he said, his voice firm yet tender. "Not on my watch. And I believe everyone deserves kindness, respect, and a chance to belong. You are important, Lyra, and I wanted you to know that from the start." Her eyes widened in shock, then filled with tears of gratitude. She had never expected such an answer. Most people, she thought, would have ignored her, laughed at her, or told her to go away. But Daniel, he had done the opposite. He had offered her a place, a safe space, and a steady presence. For the first time in a long time, Lyra felt that she truly belonged. She looked at Daniel and then at Evan, and a sense of peace settled over her. It was not a perfect world. She still missed her father. Her mother was still far away. And challenges would continue to arise, but in this moment, she felt loved, safe, and accepted, and that simple. Quiet understanding, Daniel's patience, kindness, and protective presence was more powerful than anything she had experienced in her young life. As the days passed, Lyra's visits to the park became something she looked forward to with growing excitement. She arrived earlier, stayed longer, and even began exploring areas she had never dared to before. Each day her confidence increased little by little. The fear and caution she had carried for so long seemed to fade. just enough for her to enjoy life in a way she hadn't experienced in years. And through it all, Daniel remained quietly supportive, never pushing, never judging, simply offering a steady presence that made Lyra feel safe. Evan, of course, was thrilled. He enjoyed every moment spent with Lyra, laughing at her little jokes, sharing stories, and showing her the newest spots in the park. He had the energy and enthusiasm of a child who wanted to make sure everyone felt included, and Lyra's small smiles and laughter became the highlight of his days. Daniel watched them with a soft smile, noticing how Lyra's posture had changed, how her movements were more relaxed, and how her face often lit up with genuine joy. He realized that trust, patience, and consistent kindness had worked in ways he hadn't imagined. One afternoon, Lyra hesitated before sitting down at the bench where Daniel and Evan usually waited. Her usual, confident stride was replaced by a pause as she studied the space, her large lavender eyes scanning the area. Daniel noticed immediately. He gave her a calm, reassuring nod. "You're welcome to sit," he said gently, just as he had on that very first day. For a moment, she seemed surprised. Then, slowly, she approached the bench and sat down. The simple act of being allowed to occupy a space, something so ordinary for most children, still held deep significance for Lyra. She had spent so much of her life shrinking herself, hiding and feeling that she didn't belong anywhere. But here with Daniel and Evan, she could just be. "Hi, Lyra," Evan called, waving excitedly as he ran over. "Want to play by the pond today?" Lyra's lips curved into a small smile. "Yes," she whispered. And for the first time in a long while, she felt eager, not anxious. As they walked together, Lyra began to speak more openly. She shared little stories about her life, how she had once tried to teach herself to cook, how she missed her home planet's fields and lakes, and how she often felt lonely in her apartment. Daniel listened patiently, offering gentle encouragement without ever forcing her to continue when she felt tired or hesitant. One day, Lyra turned to Daniel with a question she had been holding inside for weeks. "Why? Why did you let me sit here the first day?" she asked softly, her voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked at her, kneeling slightly to meet her gaze. "Because no one should face life alone," he said simply. "Not on my watch. Everyone deserves kindness, respect, and a chance to belong. You are important, Lyra. I wanted you to know that from the start." Her eyes widened. She blinked, trying to process the weight of his words. No one had ever said anything like that to her before. Most adults had ignored her, judged her, or even laughed at her differences. But Daniel had seen her, accepted her, and offered her a place in his life without conditions. For the first time, Lyra felt a warmth she had never experienced before. It was the warmth of true acceptance. She felt that, even in a world full of challenges and uncertainty, there was a place where she belonged. She wasn't just tolerated, she was wanted. She wasn't just safe, she was valued. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they were tears of relief, not fear. She looked at Daniel and then at Evan, and a sense of peace settled over her heart. "Thank you," she whispered. I didn't expect that. I didn't think anyone would ever care." Daniel smiled softly, placing a comforting hand on her shoulder. "You're welcome," he said. "Caring is the easiest thing in the world when someone deserves it." Evan, sensing the emotion in the moment, hugged Lyra tightly. She hugged back, feeling the warmth and comfort of friendship and trust. In that small gesture, she realized that she could rely on people, that connections could heal even the deepest fears, and that her life didn't have to be lonely anymore. Over the next few weeks, Lyra's confidence and happiness grew even more. She began exploring parts of the park she had avoided, trying new foods at the small interspecies cafe, and interacting with other children with cautious but genuine friendliness. She laughed more freely, shared stories about her home planet, and even taught Evan some of the games she had played there. Each day, she grew stronger, more self-assured, and more at ease in her surroundings. Daniel noticed the change with quiet pride. He realized that his small acts of kindness, letting her sit, listening, encouraging her, protecting her, had gradually helped her feel safe and valued. He understood that being present, consistent, and patient could make a lasting difference in a child's life, even one who had faced loneliness and fear for so long. One evening, as the three of them walked together under the soft glow of the setting sun, Lyra turned to Daniel again. I think I belong here," she said quietly, almost to herself. Daniel looked at her, his expression warm and gentle. "You do," he replied, "and you always will. You belong not because of what you do, but because of who you are." Her eyes shimmered with tears of gratitude. She had never believed that someone could see her worth without conditions, without judgment. But Daniel's words, his patience, and his unwavering kindness had shown her that she was valuable, loved, and capable of happiness. Evan skipped ahead, laughing and calling out for Lyra to follow. She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. She ran after him, hopping gracefully on her single leg, laughing freely without fear or hesitation. Daniel followed behind, watching her with a gentle smile, feeling a quiet joy that he hadn't realized he needed. From that day forward, the bond between Daniel, Evan, and Lyra grew stronger. Lyra continued to visit the park regularly, each day more confident and joyful than the last. She began sharing her life openly, laughing without fear and trusting that she had a place in this world. Daniel continued to offer guidance, protection, and patience, understanding that small, consistent acts of kindness could change a life. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and the park glowed with warm golden light, Lyra sat quietly on the bench with Daniel. "I'm glad I asked to sit here that first day," she said softly, looking up at him. Daniel smiled. "I'm glad you did," he replied. "Sometimes the smallest acts like asking to sit can lead to the biggest changes." She nodded, her eyes shining with gratitude and trust. I didn't expect anyone to answer the way you did. I thought I would always be alone." "You're not alone," Daniel said firmly. "And you never will be as long as I can help it." At that moment, Lyra realized something profound. She had found more than friends in Daniel and Evan. She had found a sense of belonging, trust, and safety that she had never thought possible. The loneliness that had weighed so heavily on her young shoulders was lifting, replaced by hope, joy, and the knowledge that kindness could change a life. As the sun set and the park grew quiet, the three of them walked together toward the exit, sharing laughter, stories, and the simple comfort of being together. Lyra felt a sense of peace she had never experienced before. For the first time in her young life, she truly believed that she could belong, that she could be happy, and that she was valued just as she was. Daniel watched her closely, his heart full. He realized that the simple act of allowing a small alien girl to sit beside him had grown into something far greater, a bond of trust, friendship, and care that would continue to grow in the days and years to come. And he knew without a doubt that this was one of the most important and meaningful connections of his life. And so, a simple question, "Can I sit here?" had led to trust, friendship, and a life-changing bond. Lyra, the one-legged alien girl, had found a place to belong. And Daniel, the human single father, had discovered the profound impact of patience, kindness, and the quiet power of simply being there for someone who needed it most.